In this video, we're going to take a look at fiber mesh and how fiber mesh can be used to create hair, as well as little spiny, more insect-like hairs on the back of our figure. So to begin, I'm just going to make sure that I've got the body selected, and I'm going to get rid of the other subtools right now. I really only need the body for this, so I don't want everything else slowing down interactivity. So the way fiber mesh works by default is you'll mask out the area that you want the hair to grow from. So I'm going to use the masking brush. Oops, I just dropped my pen. I'm going to use the masking brush here to actually mask the back of the shoulders, the tops of the shoulders a bit, the backs of the arms. I want to create really nice spiny hairs like you see in microscopic photography of insects. You know, something real creepy and spiny looking. There we go. Alright, so once I've got an area masked out, I'm going to lighten the mask there on the back of the hand. Under the tool menu, I'll open up Fiber Mesh. Now, the first button is Lightbox Fibers, and then the second one is Open. So if I go to Lightbox Fibers, I can actually open up any number of presets here. And then if I go to Open, I can browse for presets that I've already created. For example, I've got some preset files here. I'll share some of these with you for download. So for example, here, I'm going to zoom in because they're real short hairs. You can't really see them very easily. So there's a preset. Now the length probably needs to be adjusted, so I'll turn that length up and see if that doesn't make those hairs pop out a little bit more. There we go. So there's a preset that I created. Now right now it doesn't look like anything. If I click BPR, it'll preview render those hairs and I can get an idea of what they might look like. You'll notice that I've got two colors set, so these hairs are actually a shade of red going from lighter to darker. There you go. You can see these spiny little hairs now. It's easier to see up here against the black. Just to make viewing this easier, I'm actually going to go to the document window and I'm going to set the backdrop to white so these hairs show up a little bit better. And now if I go to Open, I can open up another one of my presets. For example, I'll go to, let's say, preset 7. And again, it might not look like there's anything there. If I turn my length up, there you can see some very sparse, spiny hairs sticking out of the surface. I'm going to turn up max fibers, and that'll actually increase the number of hairs. As you can see, that just brought the density up. I'm going to dial back my length just a little bit. Dial back the max fibers. There we go. Turn down slim, so it doesn't slim them and thin them out. Now you can turn up coverage if you want more coverage along the masked area. If I turn that up, you can see the effect that has. It seems to thicken the hair. There we go. So that's looking nice. I'm going to turn that length down again so they feel more like short little spiny hairs. There we go. Now if I do a BPR render, you can see the effect that this has. There we go. You see these nice short little spiny hairs. And you can see that the render actually causes the hairs to cast shadow. They might be a little tricky to see right now because we've got the mask on there to define the area where the hairs will appear. So if I like these settings, I click Accept, and it says Fast Preview for Fibers is currently off. For fast interaction speed while sculpting, this option should be activated. Yes, we do want to activate that. So now we end up with a new subtool. If I go to my subtool menu, here you can see there is the subtool for our hairs, and there is the body. Now if I switch off the mask there, just clear that mask, or I can just go to the masking menu and turn off visibility in case we want to revisit it and still use that same mask. And now I'll select the hairs. and turn the body back on. Now with hairs that are so short, I really don't need to groom them necessarily, but if I do want to move them around, I go to the brush menu and press G for groom. And that gives me access to all of these groom brushes. So if I select groom brush 1, I can brush the hairs and change their orientation. This is groom brush 1 is one of my favorites for the short spiky hairs. You can see why. It just really makes a quick work of straightening them all out a bit and helping me change their directional flow. Now if you want to change the length on some, you can go to the brush menu, B for brush, G for groom, and there's Groom Lengthen. Now the Groom Lengthen will actually elongate the hairs if you decide that you want some to be a little bit longer than others. You can do that with the Groom Lengthen brush. And then if you just press BPR, it'll do a best preview render, and it'll actually render the fibers and show you what the final result will be. Fibers can be exported as geometry, and they can also be exported as curves. So you can use these to help define hairs in other programs and other fur engines, because you can export the curves associated with them. So here you can see the really nice effect we get and really nice shadowing that we get from these hairs as well. Now when I do my renders, when I do my BPR renders, you'll also notice, I'm going to go to the render menu here and turn on render pass. You can see those hairs are included in my BPR, in the depth and in the shadow and in the mask. They are there. So let's take a quick look at how we can generate our own fiber mesh preset. I'm going to go back to my subtools, and I'll just delete the subtool for the hair we just made. And there's actually another one here. I'll delete that as well, just so we don't end up getting confused by what's what. I'll return to the body. Now remember, under masking, I still have my mask there. I just turned off view mask. I'm going to leave it turned off because fiber mesh will still recognize it, but it won't be there, obscuring our view of the shadows and the surface. I'll go to fiber mesh, and then I will click preview. Now clicking preview allows me to preview what my current settings are. So it's maintained my settings from before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn up my max fibers just a little bit. I'm going to turn up my length just slightly. Now down here there's segments. Right now segments is set to 15. If I turn these segments down, let's say to 7, that's the segments along the length of the hair. And that adjusts how much curve is possible. It's basically the subdivisions of the hair. So with fewer segments, the hair is going to be able to curve less, and it's going to give it more of a spiky appearance. Now up here I can adjust the length. Turn that length down just a little bit. Actually that's a little too much. I want to that looks pretty cool like that. Length profile is a curve. If I reset this, all the hairs become the same length. I can add noise to this curve, and what that does, it will adjust the length. It'll randomize the lengths of the hairs. So we'll close that. Now right now you see this slider by mask. That's just saying that the hair is following where the mask is placed on the surface. And there's this option, embed. Embed fibers just controls how deeply into the polygon mesh the fibers are embedded. Usually embed is fine at its default setting. If you look and it looks like your hairs are hovering above the surface in some areas, you'll just turn embed up. And that's the whole purpose of that setting. Now the width profile adjusts the width of the hair. So if I were to change these curves, it changes the width of each individual hair. And I can change that along the length. So here you can see it makes it thicker at the base, thinner at the tip. If I turn that down even more, the tips will get even smaller. Oops, I've got that in reverse. This is the tip. That's the base. There we go. So now we've got a much spikier looking hair, where it's getting thicker, thinner to thicker. coverage will adjust the surface area that's actually covered by the hairs. It's similar to max fibers in that it adjusts how dense the hair looks, but whereas max fibers is controlling the number of fibers, coverage is actually controlling the thickness of the fibers. Scale root will actually scale the root radius itself. So right now it's at 4.2. If I turn this down, you'll see the roots will get smaller on the hairs. So it's going to adjust the actual appearance slightly. It might be hard to see that because we've actually adjusted our width profile curve here. You can add twisting to the hair. Right now twist is set to 18. I can turn this up and it gets a slight twist to the hairs, but because there's not a lot of segments, it's not going to be really apparent. Since we're really going for a nice spiky sort of hair in this case, I'll turn this back down to 0. That gets rid of our twist. You can cause clumping to occur by turning up your clump slider. And then you can adjust your color using these two options for the base and the tip. So I can set my base color to be very, very dark red. And I can set my tip color to be a more saturated red. And you can also add a texture here as well. I could add textures larger than specified. Yeah, we'll resize that texture. So I'll turn off the texture. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this will actually render. If I click BPR, it'll do a quick render of this, and we can see what the result will be before we accept it and turn them into an actual fiber mesh. There we go. So now you can see our very creepy little spiny hairs there. They seem like a bit much for an insect. I want them to be more spaced out than this. So what I'll end up doing is, I'm going to go to the tip, because I think it's a little too ruddy along the tip. I'm going to have it go from this really, really, really dark red to a slightly less dark red. That's going to be my color modulation there. Now I want to come back up here and I want to change the disbursement of these fibers. So I'm going to turn down max fibers. Not that low. I'm going to turn the length down just a little bit so they're a little shorter. And we'll turn down coverage just slightly. Okay, let's go ahead and preview our render. And there we go. It's a much better effect. I feel like this definitely feels like a really coarse, spiny little hairs along the surface. Now, if you want something that's longer and more flowing, the easiest way to learn these settings is to just open up a preset. So I'll go to my Lightbox Fibers, and let's grab this hair preset here. Now you can see it's just filled the entire screen. That's because we need to change our length, because the length is too long for the scale of our object. So I'll turn this length down. There we go. And now if I do a BPR render, we can see this hair. I think it's really valuable to experiment with the presets so you can see what impacts what. It's the easiest way to learn a lot of these ZBrush tools is to experiment with the presets and see how they display. You can see this has gravity turned on. This gravity slider here is what's causing that hair to droop down in the Y direction. So this is what our character would look like with really shaggy hairs on its arms. Might not necessarily fit the character, but it's still pretty cool looking. This hair is being driven by a texture, as you can see here. And again, I've got gravity turned on. Where do we go? Gravity right here. The gravity slider has been controlling the droop on the hair. So if we turn that down, you see the hair starts to stand up. If we turn gravity up, it pulls that hair down. Now if I like that, I click Accept, click Yes, and now I've got a fiber mesh. And again, I can use my grooming brushes here to control. Make sure that my mesh is selected. I can use the grooming brush here to actually brush these hairs and control their flow. So if I want to adjust how these look and how these clump, I can do that. So if we tug a little bit of this fur back and a few calyx along the back, and then render. You'll be able to see our resulting fibers. And there we go. Now again, fiber meshes can be exported. You can export the curves. And the meshes themselves, if we go to our subtool menu, we actually have polygons as our fiber mesh. They're not going to render like this outside of ZBrush, but it is an actual piece of geometry that can be manipulated. So there we go. That is fiber mesh. I hope you enjoyed this smaller tutorial on creating hairs and fibers in ZBrush. I made quite a few presets, and I'm going to share those with you in the download files for this tutorial. So be sure to go ahead and grab those and experiment with the presets and look at how the different ones display, and be sure to experiment with making your own. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at scott@scottspencer.com. And thanks again. I'll see you in the next videos. Bye-bye.